The king is dead. Long live the king. Don Fabrizio Romano has given the here we go. We know the deal is done for Son Heung-Min to join Los Angeles Football Club. All we're waiting for now is Daniel Levy to go through his usual last-minute raising of the price, and then I'm sure we'll get some amazingly emotional content from both the club and from Sonny himself as he sails off into the footballing sunset. I'll be going through all the latest on our one remaining superstar leaving the club, but also, and arguably equally, if not more importantly, talking you through some of his possible replacements. As with Sonny going and James Maddison back on the treatment table, quite possibly for a very long time, Spurs are now looking unbelievably light creatively. All with only 9 days until the European Super Cup final, which will be quickly followed by the opening game of the Premier League season. All this and much, much more on a bumper edition of Daily Tottenham Transfer News. Guys, thank you so much for watching and for listening. Do give this video a like. Press subscribe if you're not already a subscriber for Daily Tottenham Transfer News this window. And of course, you can become a member, only £1 a month. All the details of how in the description box below. But let's get started. I wasn't able to do a video yesterday, so of course, I haven't been able to talk through all the latest on Sonny's move to LAFC. It's here we go from Fabrizio Romano. It's happening. It's believed that it will be officially announced either today or tomorrow by Tottenham Hotspur and LAFC. 20 million euros, around 15 million pounds, a number that Spurs have agreed to despite getting larger offers from Saudi Arabia, because this is what Sonny let them know he wanted to do. The MLS is the next step in his career. And to me, that opens up the possibility that maybe Sonny will come back to Europe at some point. Because if you think about the MLS and a lot of the players who've been there, for instance, Thierry Henry and David Beckham, just to name a couple, both have gone there and realized once they're there that maybe it was a little bit earlier than they should have done. And therefore, when the MLS has been off season, they have come back to Europe and the Premier League, in Thierry Henry's case, to play again. So maybe it's not the last we'll see of Sonny in Europe. That remains to be seen. That's a positive that I'm trying to take with me and think about. You just never know. I'd love to see Sonny come back to Europe at some point. I do think that money is okay for what Sonny still has to offer football-wise. 15 million pounds. I would have liked us to get 20 million pounds. I think in terms of what he brings to Tottenham Hotspur Football Club as the face of the brand, and in terms of, I'm sorry to say it, business-wise, financially, it's a low number, but that shows the respect in which we hold the player, because we could have really pushed for him to go to Saudi Arabia and we didn't. Now, I've been listening to a lot of the podcasts over the last few days, The View from the Lane, The Extra Inch, both podcasts that I really suggest, if you don't already, you subscribe to. Also, The Tottenham Way, they're three of my favorites, along with The Fighting Cock, also great podcasts. And they've all been kind of giving their almost like their eulogies. It does feel like we're grieving a little bit, their eulogies to Son Heung-Min. So it is important that I kind of give you a good idea of how I feel about Son's legacy, about how important he's been to me as a Tottenham fan over the last 10 years. And I think the best credit I can give to Sonny is that he's been so good that kind of, and this is how I felt about Harry Kane as well until after he left. It was so good that what would be deemed to be half chances for any other player, we have felt are good chances for Sonny. That is how amazing a finisher he has been. And I suggest that as we've had to deal with Harry Kane over the last 2 years, we're going to have to once again kind of re-angle what our feelings over what a good chance are. I mean, as an example, this is an extreme example. I saw the highlights from the Newcastle friendly. I wasn't able to watch it live, but I saw the highlights, and therefore, obviously, I've seen that Matthias Tell one-on-one where he basically has the entirety of the Newcastle half to himself and then tries to dummy the goalkeeper, Nick Pope, and slot it wide of him. And really, Tell was left to have some egg on his face there. Well, if that had been Sonny, even today, when I don't think he's match fit. Let's just put it that way. Sonny would have slotted that home. Harry Kane would have slotted that home. There would have been no doubt about it in the world. The confidence that they have going one-on-one, or the confidence they have in their let's keep it to Sonny, but in his kind of A1 position, which is cutting in off the left, bending it into the far left corner of the goal as from the keeper's viewpoint, or the far right of the goal as Sonny would look at it. Elite finisher, absolutely elite finisher. And ironically, the only one-on-one I can think of that he ever really missed was the one against Manchester City that if he'd scored it would have given Arsenal the title. So if legendary status wasn't already given to him for the amount of goals and assists he gave us over the years, then that should be why the statue is built, frankly. But also, of course, it would be absolutely wrong of me not to discuss his personality, his leadership, and the way he has grown into his role as a Tottenham Hotspur senior player. Just, I think the best way to maybe show you how different it is from my viewpoint is I've never seen a footballer before, not in the Premier League, not really anywhere, where when he goes off, when he gets substituted, I don't just mean in the Newcastle game, although this did happen in that friendly, but down the years, before games, when he's substituted off after games, all the players from the opposition teams go up to Sonny and talk to him. And it's not just like a shake of hands or a well done. They're all having chats with him and he's laughing with them. And he's clearly just incredibly well respected because he has an infectious personality where he cares about people. And he clearly cared very deeply about players at Tottenham Hotspur and the staff and in the last 2 years in terms of helping in a leadership role, but also just about footballers in general, understanding what they go through. And footballers do get a bad reputation. I can promise you this, it is a job. I know a lot of you think it's not a job because they just train between the hours of 10 and 12, but I've told a lot of you this before. I used to work at West Ham for a while as a producer, and you really do see when you're there every day what a job it is. They're all in before 8 a.m., if not earlier, some of them. They have to get weighed every single morning. So what they eat all day, every day is a stress for them. And then they're in the gym before training. They're getting massages before training. Then it's the 10 to 12 training. Then they all have to have lunch together. So they're there till kind of minimum 1:30, 2 o'clock. And then they have so many press and sponsorship responsibilities that very often they're there from 8 till 5, like everybody else is in the office. And then, of course, on top of that, there's the added pressure that they have of performing in front of, in Spurs' case, 62,000 fans every week. And I just got the sense from Sonny, the way that other people, other players from other clubs spoke to him and you saw them and talking to him. I got the sense that maybe he was kind of a bit of a kind of a support to people. Like he offered himself out to players and said, look, if ever you want to talk about the difficulties of this industry, come and speak to me. I'm not there, but that's just the sense I get from all the stories I've read, from the interviews I've listened to, and from the way I've seen Sonny with other players. And of course, at the end of that Newcastle game, they did a guard of honor for him, both Newcastle and Spurs. That was pretty impromptu by the way I saw it, and very impressive. And you just don't really see that with other players. As a kind of comparison, John Terry, when he left Chelsea, right, and made such a huge thing of it. And to me, that all seemed like it was decided by John Terry. I get taken off in the 26th minute because that's my number. And then everybody has to do a guard of honor. And, just that is the antithesis of what Sonny is like. Sonny was a man who thought about other people, whereas John Terry really only thought about himself. And I'm no shade on John Terry as a player. He was a magnificent player in his time, but not kind of respected, I think, within the industry the way that Sonny is. Thomas Frank gave some quotes on Sonny leaving the club. He said, for me personally, I would have loved to have worked with this fantastic person and player more. He's a true Spurs legend in every respect, one of the greatest players to play in the Premier League. It is never easy to find the perfect timing, and me coming in from the side, it makes it a bit easier to end on a high. I don't doubt that. And look, again, every single interview you hear from another manager or a player talks about what a fantastic person Sonny is. And never have we heard about Sonny in any kind of, problem in his social life, because anyone who's seen the documentary Sensational on Amazon Prime, which just shows how Sonny basically every day goes to training and then after training does more training with his dad who lives with him, shows that Sonny has been totally single-minded about his football career throughout these 10 years and before. And for me, maybe that shows a reason why maybe now Sonny needs something a little bit less frenetic in terms of the style and level of the MLS. Maybe he just needs to have a little bit of a wind down for a little bit, and he deserves it. As far as I'm concerned, he completely deserves it. Sonny had it put to him that he's looked quite sad on this tour, and was asked when he made his decision. It's been quite a while since I made my decision to leave the club. Recent days have been difficult. It was difficult to stay bright on the outside, but I did my best not to harm the club or my teammates. I came to North London as a kid, a boy who couldn't speak English. I leave this club as a young man. Thanks to all the Spurs fans who have given me so much love. And he said, in terms of who he told from his teammates that he was leaving, he said, I spoke with only a few guys. They'll be disappointed, but in a respectful way. I'm very close with Ben Davies, so we've spoken about the future, but he respected my decision. It's hard to tell my teammates as you're spending more time with them than you are your family. People will be disappointed, but in a happy way. That was my feeling, but I don't know what the actual feeling is. And then, of course, they were all quotes from before the friendly against Newcastle. And then when he was taken off on the 60th minute, he broke down in tears on the subs bench. And then at the end of the game, he did a lap of honor, and then the Spurs players all threw him up in the air. I'm sure you've seen all of this, but I just really want to give my thoughts on it. Once again, just, going to be hard to replace at Tottenham Hotspur, a very, very big player in terms of status. Our last remaining superstar, as I said in the opening. And it could kind of go one of two ways. I'd be interested to hear which way you think it might go in the comments, but it could go that there's a big gaping hole that Sonny leaves in terms of personality within the squad, in terms of leadership, and on the pitch in terms of finishing. If you think about Sonny leaving and Madders being injured, how many goals and assists is that taking out of our team, which we had even last season, when we didn't have a successful season? So in the short term, that is a bit of a worry. Or it could go the other way, which I feel happened kind of a year or two after Gareth Bale left. When did he leave? 2013, and then Spurs under Pochettino a couple of years later suddenly, I think, benefited from the fact that they didn't really have any superstars at that time. Harry Kane was a young player who was coming up and becoming a superstar, but Spurs really benefited from the fact that they were a team of young, exciting talent, all kind of pushing each other and not having anyone else to kind of take the burden, having to put responsibility on themselves. And that is something that I think Thomas Frank will very much be trying to harness at Spurs now. Say, look, there's nobody that you can look to now on the pitch or off the pitch to try and do things for you. You are all young, talented, hungry, with the odd dot of experience. Ben Davies, now Joao Palhinha, obviously, Christian Romero. But now you have to take games by the scruff of the neck yourself, take responsibility yourself, and it'll be interesting to see how Tottenham go about that. Thomas Frank was asked about the Spurs left-hand side now that Sonny's gone. He said, when a player is leaving a team, other players have a chance to shine. Brennan Johnson has played on the left. Wilson Odobert did well against there in the Arsenal friendly, and Matthias Tell can as well. Word for Brennan Johnson. It was a good finish against Newcastle, wasn't it? Interesting to see him popping up there in that kind of pocket in the what you would call the 10 role and being able to just sweep it home very easily. One thing I've said about him, and I will continue to say about him, an elite finisher. You give him chances and he will slot them home. I think Mohamed Kudus, I've said this already, but I think Mohamed Kudus has shown that Johnson is a little left behind in terms of what a right winger can bring this team, and Kudus is far and away the first choice there. But can Brennan Johnson find himself a role in that 10 whilst we don't have a player there? Basically, Kulusevski and Maddison now injured, Pap Sarr being tried out there, Lucas Bergvall being tried out there. But is it an opportunity for Brennan Johnson to say, get the ball to me in the pocket, I can take it on the half turn, and I can either lay it out to Kudus or whoever plays on the left and then get in the box because I'm a great finisher in the box, or I can use my finishing talent from outside the box like I did in that Newcastle friendly too. So I'm trying to look positively and see that as a possibility. Alistair Gold has obviously done a lot of great work. Make sure you follow Alistair Gold on Twitter, and make sure you subscribe to his YouTube channel. But he's been doing great work, as is Jay Harris out in South Korea for The Athletic. Alistair Gold for Football.London. And Ali Gold told a story about Sonny that I thought was really interesting about last season. He said, during one particularly difficult period last season for Spurs, as negativity threatened to seep into the camp as the media hammered the club for their substandard Premier League performances, Son Heung-Min called a meeting with the playing squad at Hotspur Way, during which he made it clear that they had to all stick together. It was seen as a show of real leadership at an important time, and many within the squad saw it as a defining moment in his captaincy as it galvanized a beaten, battered, and injury-riddled side. So that showed the kind of side of leadership from Son that we didn't really know about. And then another important phrase in there that I need to talk about a bit, injury-riddled. Spurs already suffering with injuries this summer. Not much seems to be changing. James Maddison looks like a terrible knee injury. Let's just hope it's not an ACL. Let's hope it's maybe meniscus or something like that, which would be more like 3 or 4 months. But ACL would rule him out of the majority of the season at this point. Kulusevski out with knee injury. Destiny Udogie is out at the moment, but let's hope now that we're back or coming back from Korea that he can rejoin the squad soon. Sonny, as he did his leaving interviews, was asked his final wishes for leaving Spurs. He says, I hope they win all 5 competitions, including the FA Cup and Carabao Cup. That's my wish and that's my hope. And of course, Tottenham now have one South Korean player left, Yang Min-hyuk. He said this about him. Sonny said this about him. Min-hyuk and I have gotten much closer. So we even joke around. There's a 14-year age difference. So joking with him still feels a bit strange, but it's nice to see. Even today, he went in and worked really hard, meaning during the Newcastle friendly. Watching a young player like that made me think I need to work hard too in my new environment. Yang Min-hyuk actually had a really good opportunity when he came on against Newcastle, where he was put through on goal and he had the pace to get away from the defenders, but he almost did this thing that I remember from when I was playing football when I was young, that sometimes happens when you want something so badly that you're not relaxed. He clearly wanted to score that goal so badly and that his body wasn't able to relax. So he got away from them with his pace, but then a kind of, I don't know what the right way of putting it, but his body wasn't able to relax. So he missed, he took a bad touch basically away from goal and then had to cut back and try and find another player. But I think the key point for that in terms of his age was his movement and his positioning was excellent. And there is definitely something there with him, although he is incredibly small. And it's one thing playing and looking relaxed in friendlies, even a competitive friendly like that against Newcastle, but in the Premier League where you're going to get kicked and battered around. Be interesting to see if Yang Min-hyuk stays this season or goes out on loan. I'll talk more about the loan things, the loan situation, later in the episode. Ange Postecoglou talked about Son Heung-Min this week as well, and he said this: he's exactly as you see him. Sometimes the public perception of a person is a lot different to how they actually are, but with Sonny, there was no difference in the way the public perceived him to how he was in private. The one thing about Sonny that people don't understand is that he's lived in a goldfish bowl for pretty much the entirety of his career. He's always had eyes on him. To live in that sort of cauldron for as long as he has, and I doubt you could find one person to say something negative about him, is just incredible. Ange was asked about his decision to name him as captain. He said, I thought the key thing in looking for a leader was a unifier. And this is who Sonny is. He could literally sit at any table in the lunchroom, whether it was staff or players, and get a conversation going. That was going to be important for us. His demeanor at the training ground and the way he trained was almost like he was a first-year player every time he was out there. If your leaders are not engaged or lack enthusiasm at any stage, that filters through to the whole group, but he would not allow that to happen. Now, I think that's an important quote from Ange, and I love hearing from Ange about this. That's an important quote because I've been talking a lot this summer about how I think Christian Romero should take over the captain's armband. He's now the longest serving player at the club other than Ben Davis. And I'm hoping that if he does get the captain's armband, it would inspire Christian Romero to really want to lead this team and this club. However, that quote from Ange there where he says, if your leaders are not engaged or lack enthusiasm at any stage, that filters through to the whole group. That is a little bit of a worry with me for me with Romero, because if we give him the captain's armband when he only has 2 years left on his deal, and clearly he has been interested in moving to Spain either for Atletico Madrid under Diego Simeone or to Real Madrid, then there could be at times maybe a lack of enthusiasm from Romero if maybe results started going awry, or obviously we do feel like we have history with him of slightly dropping off his interest in the club just before big Argentina games. So let's see what happens about that. I'm not really sure who the other options are. I mean, Mickey van der Ven for me would be an option as captain. But again, you look at him and you say, can we trust that he's going to be on the pitch enough? I feel like if it was a year down the line and Van der Ven had played an entire season, then that would be a bit of a no-brainer for him as captain. Same with Dejan Kulusevski. He's got captaincy written all over him, leadership material, wants to win, real kind of force of nature, but he's injured at the moment. So I'm not sure you can really pick him as club captain. Let me know who you think should replace Sonny as captain in the comments. I think it's an interesting one and a difficult one for Thomas Frank. And possibly it's a decision that'll be made in the next few days. We've got the Bayern Munich friendly on Thursday at 5:30. It's now Tuesday morning. And you'd like to think that he'd want his captain leading them out at Bayern Munich a week before, just less than a week before the Super Cup final against Paris Saint-Germain. One more comment from Ange on Son Heung-Min. He said, I made him a big focus of our Europa League run because I thought he was symbolic of where people saw Tottenham Hotspur as a club. Obviously, he's an outstanding player, but he was missing that key piece of success. I told the players if we can elevate Sonny to a level above some of the best players that have ever played for this club by winning something and having him lift a trophy, we're all going to be part of something special. We're going to be part of his legacy. And I have to say that is genius motivation from Big Ange Postecoglou. That is where he was almost as much of a psychologist as he was a football manager, because to make it all about them making Sonny happy elevated Tottenham, especially in those knockout rounds of the Europa League, the quarterfinal, semis and final. It made them play in a way where losing wasn't an option. And it all worked out. Smart from Big Ange. And I actually really hope Thomas Frank is reading about stuff like this, because finding the right angle for those motivational speeches and those reasons to get the players up for games, absolutely huge. Okay, guys, before I go into the latest Tottenham transfer news in terms of replacements for Sonny, once again, please do give this video a like. Please do press subscribe. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, I bring you daily on weekdays Tottenham transfer news throughout this window, as well as all the news and views from White Hart Lane, of course, as well. And press that bell button for notifications as to when my content drops. Okay, so Spurs, again, in Spain, being linked with signing Real Madrid winger Rodrigo as a replacement for Sonny, and apparently have made a €100 million offer, £87 million for his services. However, once again, as I have reported this summer already, Rodrigo not looking at Spurs as his ideal option. He wants to go to Liverpool. Well, mate, I don't think that's going to happen. Hugo Ekitike is there ripping it up already, did really well in a friendly I saw highlights of yesterday. And they're trying to get Alexander Isak, and they've already spent money on Florian Wirtz, on Kirkes. They have had a great summer window, and I don't think they're going to open the checkbook up for, you know, what would have to be over 120 to 130, if not more, £1 million for Alexander Isak, and then spend €100 million, £87 million on Rodrigo. So I'll be interested to see with Rodrigo. What I wouldn't rule out is later in the transfer window, if Real Madrid keeps saying to Rodrigo, you're not in our plans here, and Liverpool aren't going to buy him, and Arsenal maybe, who have also potentially been linked with him, maybe they go for Eze or don't have the money for another signing. Would Rodrigo then potentially be interested in a move to Spurs down the line if there was no kind of other option of clubs who are willing to pay the money? Possibly, but for me, I think that it's a difficult one to do. Are you sure you really want a player like Rodrigo who isn't desperate to come to your club? I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. Some reports that Spurs have submitted an immediate inquiry about Jack Grealish's availability from Man City following James Maddison's pre-season injury blow to play in that 10 role. I've said it all summer. I'll say it again, I'm wary of us bringing in players who've had their big move. Grealish is on 300 grand a week at Man City. He's a £100 million signed player. He's now 29 years old. He's barely played in a season and a half, if not 2 seasons. I'd be wary of it. Maybe as a loan, it'd be something I'd be interested in. Could we get him motivated? Could we get him up for it? He loves to play in off that left flank. He wins a lot of set pieces. He'd be great for Thomas Frank in that sense, in that Thomas Frank loves to put pressure on from set pieces. And he could float about in that role, but I would worry that whether Grealish would be motivated enough to really work forward and back for Tottenham Hotspur. A report that came in late last night, again, Spurs interested in signing Conor Gallagher from Atletico Madrid and are prepared to pay around €50 million to finalise a move for the 25-year-old England international midfielder. I'm not sure if that would deal with the creativity issue necessarily at Spurs. Maybe it would free up Rodrigo Bentancur to play a bit further forward, but he's not a natural kind of lock picker, if you like. That's the way I look at those players who can play in that 10 role. The players who are scanning all the time, got their head up, can see where the gaps are to slot players through. For me, that would be about Gallagher bringing more steel into central midfield for Spurs, which wouldn't be a bad thing. I'm going to talk about Joao Palhinha in a second, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that one. Other reports, Tottenham have approached Barcelona about signing Marc Casado. It's believed the player does not currently want to leave, but Barcelona are keen for him to depart as they can no longer count on him. Very much Fabrizio Romano words there. Barcelona value him at 30 million euros. Mad weekend reports about a player from Stuttgart that Tottenham were supposedly interested in, Enzo Milo, who a lot of the kind of Tottenham tactics guys really rated as a potential number 10 and wanted us to get in. Atletico Madrid were also interested in him. However, yesterday, he has gone to Saudi Arabia at the age of 23. So another one off Tottenham's list. And it just shows, I've talked about it a lot, so many clubs have to decide that they do not want a certain player before clubs like Tottenham in this day and age can try and go for him and have a chance of getting him. And even with a player like Milo now, Saudi Arabia offering the riches come in, and that pushes Tottenham off the opportunity list. Barcelona also potentially willing to sell Fermin Lopez, and he's been the subject of interest from Tottenham, and apparently they made an approach for the attacking midfielder last summer. So that's another one to keep an eye on. Spurs also showing strong interest in a summer move for promising AIK forward Kevin Filling. He's only 16 years old, seen as a proper starlet and wonder kid in Sweden, and Tottenham have made a concrete inquiry for him. Tottenham have had a lot of luck buying in the Swedish market recently, obviously Lucas Bergvall and Dejan Kulusevski, Swedish players, not to generalize too much, but hard workers and more technically excellent down the years. So I can see why we're really looking to Scandinavia to bring in young players. Okay, at the weekend, it was finally announced officially that Joao Palhinha signed for Spurs on a one-year loan deal with a 30 million euro option at the end of the season. Thomas Frank apparently very excited about the opportunity to have Palhinha at Spurs, as he can provide experience, quality, as well as intensity. He's exactly the type of player that Frank wanted, according to Fabrizio Romano. And he actually said this as well, Thomas Frank, on his official unveiling. It was always his abilities. And if you look at the squad, I don't think we have his ability or package as a clear number 6 with his profile. His defensive qualities, his ability to be in the center of the pitch, disciplined, his distribution short, diagonals, passes in behind, and then his ability to break up play. Especially if you're playing away from home or against good counter-attacking teams, it's very important to have one that you know is not running away or getting attracted to something. His set-piece ability in both boxes is also a key thing, and he has Premier League experience, which is good. I have to say, every time I hear Thomas Frank talking about a player that we've signed, he just makes sense. He says things that I think a lot of us in the Spurs community and the Spurs fan base have been saying about what Tottenham need. Now, what'll be interesting is, can Palhinha stay fit? He had a big injury at Bayern Munich, which didn't allow him to play a lot of games. But previous to that at Fulham, he played pretty much fit for a couple of seasons. He loves to dive into tackles. I've talked about this before. If you're someone who likes a bet, get your bet on him to get a yellow card in pretty much most games, because his raison d'etre on the football pitch is he loves sliding into tackles, and every so often he gets them wrong. He got a red card for Bayern Munich at home in the 40th minute, one of their games when they were leading 2-1. And that wasn't even one of his slide tackles. He just went in hard to what was almost a 50-50. He got the ball first, and his follow-through caught the player just under the knee. So I think there will be a lot of yellow cards and probably some red cards for Palhinha this season for Spurs. But one thing I think I've been thinking about in terms of what he'll bring that maybe we haven't got, that really breeds positivity throughout a stadium, is sometimes, and this goes under the radar a lot, sometimes if a player slides in, takes ball and man, and even if it just goes out for a throw-in, the fans get really up for it, and it really can change the momentum of the atmosphere in a stadium. And that's something that I think Palhinha will really bring. And everything that Thomas Frank said there about having a player who is disciplined and doesn't get dragged away is something that Tottenham haven't experienced for the last 2 years. Because as far as I'm concerned, Ange Postecoglou basically told his players to get dragged away. Oh, if you see an opportunity to get forward, you do it. Well, as a result, we would constantly concede goals where just one pass would go through the middle of the pitch, and either the player would slot it home from outside the box, or they'd lay someone in at the back post to cross it for a cutback and a goal. And I think Palhinha will definitely help us on that front. I think him and Rodrigo Bentancur as a potential double pivot could be quite, really, show its teeth. I think it'd be quite a physical double pivot in the Premier League and make it hard for clubs to break Spurs down. Frank was asked if an older player like Palhinha adds experience to the squad and if that's why he got him. He said it doesn't have to be that experience in terms of age. Kudus is experienced and he's 24. He's tried a lot in his life and he can perform now. I think it's important to have some players who can perform right now. We need to have enough of them and enough talent. We need the perfect blend because I think we have some big talent in the middle of the pitch like Archie Gray, Lucas, and Pape. And that's why I talk about exactly what I mean when I say Thomas Frank just seems to get it, seems to know exactly what we need in the same way that we've all kind of spotted for the last 2 years. We need oven-ready, box-fresh Premier League experienced players now, experience and discipline down the middle of the park, down the spine, that can then allow those young players like Gray, like Bergvall, and to some degree like Papsar, who's still only 22 years old himself, to grow kind of without always being thrown in the spotlight, without always having the responsibility on them. And I think those players will grow as they're around them. Interestingly, it should be said, Archie Gray's had a lot of stick for his performances in midfield in the few occasions he's had the chance to play there. And he played there against Newcastle and did very well, according to everybody who watched the game and all the podcasts I've listened to. So that is great. It shows, I think, already Thomas Frank is developing players and improving them. Frank was also asked why he wanted to sign a number 6, and he said, when I came in and assessed the squad, it was an area where I thought we needed something. I know the squad, I know the team, I've watched extra games before I came to Spurs. It's always different when you walk in and you feel the players, though you work with them, and watch intense video with my eyes and the way I want things to go. Upon his arrival, Palhinha said, I didn't have to think too much about it, to be honest. I just wanted to come to Spurs. The coach is probably the main thing that had an impact on my decision. When you feel that someone wants you, it means a lot. And when you feel it, I think you're much closer to making an easy decision. He was asked about his goals for the coming season. He said, personally, I just want to play to show again what I'm capable of doing here in the Premier League. I just, and at this top club. As a collective, as a team, I just want to try to win titles. I think that we all have the potential here to do something really special. Of course, it's not easy. We all know that this is the most competitive league in the world, but with all the potential that we have in this team, I'm really motivated to try and achieve some great things for the club. And he was asked about being reunited with Pedro Porro. There's actually a nice social media video from Spurs yesterday where they met each other again for the first time, because of course they played for Sporting Lisbon together before they both left the Portuguese league. And he said this about Porro. He said, I told him when I spoke to him in the last few weeks that I hope to win titles with him again. We have great memories together, and for me, he's a top player, one of the best right backs around. And Pedro said, I spoke with him and told him that the club is amazing. You have everything here. The most important thing is that when you play well, it's incredible. Of course, I'm happy he's coming. He's also excited to come here. Okay, guys, I'm going to go on now to talk about a little bit more of the latest Spurs news, starting with that overlap interview with Daniel Levy yesterday. Gary Neville and Daniel Levy had a kind of 35-minute interview walking around the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Just before I go into it, once again, do give the video a like. Do press subscribe if you're not already a subscriber for all the latest news and views from Spurs. Now, obviously, as a fan base, we've all been calling out for Daniel Levy to be more communicative, to talk more. And it started when Vinay came in and they did a little interview where they talked about their relationship with one another. Daniel talked about why he brought Vinay Venkatesham in as CEO. They had a very embarrassing moment making jokes about fine wines. And I think Vinay is probably the driver behind these kind of things and trying to give Daniel a better reputation among the fans. However, I do also think that it can backfire. And I do think we all want Daniel Levy to talk more, but we want him to talk more about the things that we feel he never answers. And I have to say, this overlap interview with Gary Neville, it felt very much like a PR puff piece. It felt to me, and I feel very strongly, that Daniel Levy had almost kind of creative control, not only over what questions were asked of him, but probably over the final edit of the piece. And there's been a lot of talk about how Daniel Levy in the last few months did an interview with Simon Jordan for his podcast. And interestingly, that never came out. And I think that is because Simon Jordan and probably his producers are very, very single-minded in terms of it being their content and not to be pushed around in terms of what's asked and what's edited together. Whereas this felt, like I said, like Gary Neville and Sky and the overlap just agreed. And Daniel Levy, for most of it, talked about the Premier League, and almost it felt like Gary Neville was getting his own agenda in a lot of the time, because he was asking about parachute payments and the deal with the EFL. And of course, Gary Neville owns Salford, who are in the EFL. So that seemed a bit like Neville getting his own agenda in. But kind of worse than that almost was that it just came across like a 35-minute tour of the stadium, which is Daniel Levy's kind of, look what I did, look what I built, and Gary Neville kind of praising him over it. And there's been nothing that was said in yesterday's overlap that he hasn't said before about the stadium. We moved into it 6 years ago now. Yes, of course, it's amazing. He did an incredible job, but that's not what we mean by communication, Daniel. We don't need you to come out and have, smoke blown up your ass, frankly, about what a great job you've done administratively, or administratively even, sorry. And that's what it felt like. Daniel showing him around different bits of the stadium, and oh yes, I had to, I fronted a meeting every Tuesday with the contractors and the architects, and kept coming up with new ideas, and the money kept going up and whatever. Fine, Daniel, we don't care. We've seen those interviews before, and we've seen interviews where you've answered all of these questions that you answered from Gary Neville before as well. And funnily enough, and I was saying this to my friend Martin last night, where we've seen these answers to questions is at the annual Q&A with the fans, where Daniel Levy chooses the questions he's going to be asked and has final cut on the edit from those videos that are released via the club. So that's why it felt very, very samey. For me, I think Gary Neville had a huge opportunity yesterday and to ask the questions that Spurs fans want answered, and he didn't. And that's why, again, I think that Levy had control over the edit, because he could have asked about he did ask about Spurs spending, and Daniel Levy said, we're fourth highest spenders since we moved into the stadium. And that's true. But Spurs fans don't doubt that. What we doubt is, why are the wage numbers so low? So why didn't Gary Neville ask him that? Why didn't he ask him about the Super League? Why didn't he ask him about furloughing the staff during lockdown? Why didn't he ask him about his Daniel Levy's very specific and well talked about negotiation techniques when he's got players who are interested in joining the club? The way that he makes negotiating so difficult with other clubs that we lose out on those players. Gary Neville should have asked him about that, because these are the things that fans want to know about. Why didn't he ask him about the Morgan Gibbs-White situation? Now, maybe as an argument, maybe this was recorded before that. I'm not sure. So that could be why. But those as examples of all the things that Gary Neville had an opportunity to ask. And we do know Gary Neville likes to say it as it is. That's what he feels he is as a broadcaster. And that's, again, not to kind of press this home too hard, but I think Daniel Levy was very much in control of that. Daniel Levy was very much in control of that piece of content. I do not, just to emphasize as I end talking about this, I don't think Daniel Levy is a bad guy. And I don't think, as you will have heard me say, I'm not Levy out. I'm not Enoch out or Levy in or Enoch in, because I'm just not sure who the replacement is going to be. And you can't, like as an example of what we've gone through in the last month, Marinakis at Nottingham Forest, who needs to be front and center of everything. He is the perfect example of how it can go when you change owner. And Forest fans will say for now, we love that, but if they have a bad start to the season, you can bet your bottom dollar they will start turning on Marinakis. So I don't know who we're going to get in return, like if Levy leaves, but I also just don't think he helps himself. He's so far away from the common fan, it is ridiculous. And I think he probably knows that, and that's the reason why he hates doing public facing things. But he has an opportunity when he does it to talk about the things the fans need the answers to, and he's not doing it. And if I was Vinay Venkatesham pushing Daniel Levy to keep going with this kind of more communicative style, that is where I'd be pushing him. You have to answer the questions that you've never answered before, that Spurs fans want the answers to. And to put my final piece on it, also, I think we need to hear Daniel Levy apologize. I think we need to hear him talk about the mistakes that he's made, and say, yeah, I've been here 25 years. Of course, I've made mistakes along the way. And these are the ones I wish I'd done differently. And here's what happened. But he doesn't do that. He pays lip service sometimes to it. I think he said in a couple of statements, yes, there's some mistakes have been made, but he never takes accountability himself. And that's what I think needs to change. Okay. Some other quotes coming out of the club over the weekend and Monday. Mohamed Kudus has talked about being at Spurs and his own style of play. He says, I've always seen the game as trying to be different. We have a lot of passes and guys who, and we have a lot of passes in the club and less guys who want to take people on and dribble. And that's how I've always grown to play. I try to entertain the fans as much as I can, so it's always been a part of my game. Very excited to see Kudus play in the Premier League this season. If we can keep him fit and keep him motivated, he's going to be an unbelievable player. He talked about wanting to play in the Champions League. He said, these are the levels we live to play for, and I think the club deserves to be in that spot. We need to make the most of it. And he was asked about his feelings on Son Heung-Min. He says, I have so much respect and admiration for him. We played against each other in the World Cup. I just love how he plays. He's done a lot for the club, and I'm grateful to have come here and played with him. He has been a great example for us from how he trains and carries himself. So big up to him. Kevin Danso has also done an interview. He was asked about his goals for next season. He said, to build on last year. The aim is to win and become a winning club. It's everybody's goal at the club and the new manager's goal as well. We're going to try our best to be better in the league and win more trophies. My personal goal is the same, to win trophies with Spurs and play as much as possible. Just win trophies. That's the most important thing. That is what this massive club deserves and needs. He also went on to talk about following in a great pantheon of centre-backs at Spurs. He said, you got Vertonghen, Alderweireld, Ledley King. Growing up watching him, it's an honour to be here following in their footsteps, and I'll try my best to leave a legacy as much as they did. I'll talk about this a bit more in a second, but all reports are that Luka Vuskovic has been made available for loan this summer. And as a result, I think that shows how much Thomas Frank believes in Kevin Danso as kind of first change behind Mickey van der Ven and Christian Romero. So I think Danso will play a lot of minutes this season. He's impressed me. He obviously he was responsible for the goal for Brennan Johnson in that Newcastle friendly, stepping in from centre back, breaking up play and getting the ball through to Johnson. There was a report from the Mail, I think it was on Friday, but since I've done a video where Evangelos Marinakis, who I just spoke about, the Nottingham Forest chairman, believed that Morgan Gibbs-White would have been taking a backward step in his career if he joined Tottenham. And then hilariously in the social media video releases for Joao Palhinha's signing, Tottenham made Joao Palhinha say no backward steps, which I just thought was a nice dig. I think Marinakis is mad, and I think Morgan Gibbs-White he's going to regret signing that contract. Okay, late last night, reports came out that Oxford have beaten off much competition to sign Will Lancashire on loan this season. That came after earlier in the day, Ali Gold revealed that Luka Vuskovic, Jamie Donnelly, George Abbott, Yang Min-hyuk and Tyrese Hall have all been made available for loan alongside Alfie Devine and Dane Scarlett. That came since Mikey Moores joined Rangers on loan for the 25-26 campaign. He wasn't signed in time for their first Scottish Premier League game of the season at the weekend, where they drew. And interestingly, they drew, and then their new manager Russell Martin had a proper go at the players in the press conference afterwards. Brave is the way I would put that. And then just finally, a couple of bits of Spurs kind of admin and boardroom news. Spurs have appointed Catalina Kim as Chief Corporate and Development Advisor. She is the first Asian woman to hold a senior executive role at a Premier League Big Six club. She's a multilingual super agent and CEO of C&P Sports. She played a major role in major European football deals, including the Man City takeover and the Chelsea sale. She'll lead Spurs' global corporate strategy and long-term partnership development. So good to see Spurs diversifying in terms of the people that they're appointing and still trying to build themselves up as a club. Okay, I did say at the top this would be a bumper edition. Thank you so much, guys. Apologies, I couldn't do a video yesterday. I was away from my house, but also big up to Bertie, who is a 12-year-old who I met on Sunday afternoon when I was at my brother-in-law's 60th birthday party, and he said that he was a fan of the channel. And Bertie, very good young footballer. We had a little bit of a kickabout with him and his dad. And check him out. Well, I don't know his surname, so it'll be hard to check him out. But yeah, maybe a young Tottenham player in the making. And thanks for being so kind, both him and his dad. All right, guys, make sure you give this video a like. Do press that subscribe button and the bell button for daily Tottenham Hotspur transfer content throughout this window. And also, you can be a member, just £1 a month. All the details of how in the description box below. Enjoy your Tuesday, guys. Come on, you Spurs.